Hello, Caesar here. I have today a message that I would call very, very important. And I'm not using the words lightly. I really believe it's a heavy subject and a heavy message. I had an insight a few days ago, and I waited to see if it still holds, and it does. And that's why I encourage you to listen to this message to the end, although it might take more than 5 minutes or so, and perhaps even listen a few times. Just because it will gonna give you a different appreciation to life, um, you're gonna relate differently to people around you, basically increasing the quality of your relationships. In this sense, I talked about this subject a little bit in some previous posts. I'm gonna put the links underneath if you want to take a look at them, about the analogy between the mind and the body. And I was saying that I was noting that actually we have sensations all the time. Just succinctly, I'm gonna mark it. We have sensations all the time in our body, on our bodies, and we don't really even pay attention to them. However, if we, let's say, trip, for instance, and if we lose the balance, we have some sensations which tells us about the position of our bodies in this field of gravity in which we are immersed. Because otherwise, without those sensations, we wouldn't know anything about the position of our body, how balanced our body is. And I marked that actually the balance of the body, it is the most important thing. If I want to go to the kitchen to do something, the most important thing before anything else, it is to hold on to the balance of my body in order to be able to move. So basically that's a thing that those sensations do. And one other thing that I pointed is that those sensations are not my business, Caesar, are my body's business. My job is just to be aware, but then is nothing that I do consciously about them to rebalance the body. I'm not figuring exactly how tightly to, contract my muscles or in which way to rotate my hips or anything like that in order to rebalance my body. But once I am aware, my implicit learning that my body has, my embodied learning, knows what to do to rebalance the body. And the more I consciously interfere with that, the worse it gets. And I marked also that this is the same thing which happens with the mind. Our minds are immersed in this field of thought. Let's call it this way, field of thought. And we wouldn't know anything about the position of our minds in this field of thought without the feelings that we have. So those feelings are just the natural result of the interaction between our minds and the field of thought. And exactly as with the analogy with the body, it's nothing for me, Caesar, to do about those feelings. It's not my job to deal with them, to get rid of them or anything like that. It's just to be aware of them. And my mind will know exactly what to do to rebalance itself, if left alone, if I don't interfere consciously with them. Now, the insight that I have, though, refers to something else, because it gets trickier than that. Imagine that you live on a planet where, you see, on Earth right now, the field of gravity is a constant, so we can rely on it. Basically, that's how it goes. We kind of know. We learned in childhood how it works, and now we use it every day thousands of times without even realizing it, without even calling it this way. We pour water from a bottle into a glass. We walk. We do all sorts of things. But imagine that you live on a planet where the field of gravity changes moment by moment, randomly. How would that be? Just imagine for a moment that this field of gravity would constantly change randomly, to the right, to the left, heavier, stronger or lighter, and so forth. How would that be for you? And that's the natural way how, from the moment you were born, that's how it was. So by now you would be already accustomed to it. Can you imagine how more alert you would be, how more attentive you would be to all the signals that you would receive from your body for your body to automatically readjust itself. How much more aware and alert you'd be. Imagine that. Imagine trying to go from here to the kitchen and trying to pour water from a bottle into a glass. And constantly this field of gravity changes all the time, moment by moment, and has nothing to do with you. It says nothing about you as, how worthwhile of a person you are, or how, how successful you would be, or anything like that. It just changes because that's how it is. Just like the weather, it changes all the time, and this says nothing about you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So imagine that how attentive you should be to pour water from a bottle into a glass. If that field of gravity would change all the time, you would need to be very, very alert in order to make subtle changes at all times in order to be able to do that successfully. Now that's basically what happens with the mind. Our minds are immersed in this field of gravity. And this field of gravity changes moment by moment, at all times, randomly, and has nothing to do with you. It says nothing about how worthwhile you are, or anything like how, again, successful you'll be in life, if you're going to accomplish anything in life or anything like this. It just changes. It just changes. Let me make a point. Let's say it's not entirely dissociated from you. Let's say you have some sort of influence. As one of my coaches, James Tripp, says, we are co-creators of life, of our reality. But that means we are co-creators. That means that it is a big part of our reality that we want to create that we have no control over. That we have no control over. So that part that we have no control over, it is this field of thought which changes at all times, and no matter what we do, it will be influenced by that. Of course, we have a part of influence, of course, by ways of what kind of thoughts, behaviors do we choose to engage with, knowing that nothing that is most of what surrounds us, of our external circumstances, of our things that we look at, have nothing to do with us, then that means that we can choose what kind of things to engage with, because they say nothing about us, about usually people take some decision because they think this is how we are. Oh, that happens, that means this is how we are. This is how I am, and that's how I should behave. Not true, not true. It's a random thing. It's like, imagine a captain running a ship. The fact that, going across Atlantic, he encounters storms or no storms, says nothing about him. And if that storm happens, that storm basically, again, says nothing about how good of a captain is. What says what kind of a captain is what he does during the storm. Does he get lost into thinking, oh, that storm happens, that always happens to me, I'm not good at anything, I'll better take a job somewhere else, and so forth? Or he engages with what needs to be done, given the fact that right now it is a storm, which, just happens. Just happens. And the more we see circumstances in life as a storm, as something random that happens, over which we have no control, and that say nothing about us, the more we will have access to the resources inside, the more we will be able to hold on to that peace, to that quietness inside, to be able to access the resources that we have inside. Most people ask me, why is presence important? Because I keep saying presence is the most important thing. Presence and connection are the most important thing to hold on. And they ask me, well, why presence would be such an important thing? Well, I believe this is the answer. I believe this is the answer. And again, this is just a metaphor. It's a model. It's not how it is. It is just something to be able to convey an information to you. Presence it is important exactly because this field of thought changes at all times. And our awareness and presence, it is important just to be aware, to give a chance to the mind to rebalance itself. Because without our awareness, the mind will not have access to that information. I know how it is, for instance, when you walk and you trip, it's useful to be aware of the fact that you lose that balance. I know I had a surgery and a brain surgery, so basically for a while actually I had no idea when I started to fall. I had no idea. One moment I was straight, one moment I was down on the floor, because I had no awareness of the fact that I started to lose balance. That's why awareness it is important. That's why presence it is important. Just to pay attention, where is your mind going to? Right? What's happening right now with this principle of thought? What happens right now with thought, with big letters? What happens right now with thought? Where does it want to carry my mind? And the more I am aware, it's nothing for me to do to bring it back or anything like that. It's just to be aware that actually my mind starts to slide into a certain direction, not because I'm a bad person, but just because that's where the field of thought opens. That's the direction of the opening of the principle of thought. And my mind obviously has a tendency to fall into that direction. Just as, when I trip onto a rock, my mind has a tendency to fall on one side. So in this sense, hold on to your presence and know that your circumstances, what happens outside, is just like the weather. It has nothing to do with you and you have no control over. I'm really excited about that and about this finding, about this insight. It really opened up a way. And even when you consider the way you relate to others, when you know that you are in this field of gravity which changes all the time and you're barely able to hold on to that plate with soup because it changes all the time and it is a challenge for you. Now you have a different appreciation for other people going through all sorts of turmoils because they go through the same thing. Only they don't even know that they go through that same thing. And it is frustrating for them to notice that they are not able to hold on to that plate of soup on their hands. It's frustrating. But once they get to know that this is what it is, now they have a different type of response to it. And when you see them doing that, you have a different appreciation to them because you're going through the same things too. So think about that. Think about that, because we all have our tantrums, our downfalls, and ups and downs and so forth. Think about that and just don't take them personally. Realize there's nothing to do about them. Again, it's not that you need to handle your feelings or anything like that. Just to know, because you see, when you have that kind of falling into one opening of the principle of thought, and you fall with your thinking into that direction, it's really not much you can do. You're going into that cascade, into that slide, into water slide. There's nothing that you can do about it, really. You can try to do all sorts of things, but it doesn't really help. Doesn't really help. It's like the weather. When it rains, I can take an umbrella, but that doesn't change the weather. It just helps me protect a little bit, but doesn't change the weather. And realize that when you start to slide into that side, it's like having glasses wearing red lenses. For you, the world becomes red in that moment. For you, the world becomes red. There's nothing that you can do. The only thing that you can do about it, somebody called me, the only thing that you can do about it is just to realize that you are wearing glasses. And the more you contemplate this idea in your moments of peacefulness, the more you will be able to remember it in your moments of sliding. Just know that you are wearing glasses, and for a while the world will be red. And if you just leave it alone, it will change. It will change. The weather changes. Now it rains, tomorrow snows, and God knows what happens the day after that. It is just what it is. If you just leave it alone, the principle of thought will change. So in one way it is something frustrating that it changes all the time, but in other ways it's a useful thing, because that it will change. As the Eastern philosophy says, that shall pass too. I really encourage you to think about that, because I truly believe, and I'm not, again, I'm not using the words lightly. I really believe this is a heavy thing. And the more you contemplate it and you get behind actually the message, the words that I'm using, and get the real sense of what I'm trying to convey to you, I believe this is going to make a huge difference in your life. Let me know what happens for you. Love and kindness. Take care.